Well, thank you for tuning in to another edition of Media Monitor and welcoming us into your homes. Media Monitor is a platform where we discuss what makes news and why some issues have very little social impact while others have a huge impact. Now, this Sunday, as we always do, we intend to deepen the understanding of the role of the media in our democracy, as well as create more awareness among TV viewers, radio listeners, newspaper readers and users of news websites, as well as on social media. Please be part of our discussions today by calling us on the following numbers. It's +2711 714 6843, 714 6847 and 714 6857. Alternatively, interact with us on our social media platforms at Media Monitor, at SA Media Monitor, of course. And remember, during the course of this show, we will be crossing over live to the Waterkloof Air Force Base, where, of course, the remains of struggle stalwarts Mr. Moses Kotane and JB Marks have returned to the country. A very good morning to you. Now, our SABC online platform is running with the following stories this morning. Khadebe lauds Kotane Marks for their role in liberating South Africa. All right, well, to help us make sense of today's and the week's stories, we are joined in studio by our very own Mahlatsi Gellens. She's a deputy political editor for SABC Radio News. Mahlatsi, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a big day today. Of course, the struggle stalwarts have returned to the country, and that's our biggest story today. We will be dipping in and out of the Waterkloof Air Force Base. But let's have a look at the news that are making headlines today. There it is the Sunday Independent leading with SAA chief in hoax emails drama. The City Press, the SA spies run for cover. And of course, the Sunday Times, minister covers up wild shopping sprees. All right, let's start by discussing those newspaper headlines. Mahlatsi, the Sunday Independent, very big story today. SAA chief in hoax emails drama. Now, apparently, Mr. Famous private investigator Paul O'Sullivan allegedly tried to get SAA chairwoman to resign using fake documents and bank statements that he alleged were her offshore accounts. Mahlatsi, what do you make of this story, and especially in the wake of what has just happened with the spy cables?
Look, I think SAA, we've seen problems within SAA, especially now we know that they've been struggling financially, and all of this does not bode well. I know that there's another case of the lady who was supposed to be providing wines to SAA, also involved in another alleged corruption scandal. So all headlines that are not boding well for an airline that is trying to redeem itself and actually make sure that it becomes financially sustainable. We know that they're trying to reduce costs so that they can continue being functional. So all of this not boding well for the national carrier. And the budget speech has just come out, of course, and we know that SAA is going to get a boost from government. What do you make of the story now and how it's treated now, Mahlatsi? Look, I think that obviously it will form part of all the stories that are being told by around SAA, but also in a time when they're trying to rebuild SAA. We know that they've had so many turnaround strategies. This will not go well for the airline at all. Let's move on there now and look at the Sunday Times. Now, Sunday Times is leading with Minister covers up wild shopping sprees. This headline, Mahlatsi, basically Minister Mildred Oliphant's advisor, Mr. Herbert Mkhize, has allegedly ripped off the government funded Nedlec Labour Council of more than R1 million. It seems there's active raids in government and spending, Mahlatsi, especially at this time of the year. It seems that somebody's looking out for the corruption there. What do you think? Look, I think it raises questions around how money is actually spent by government. Every other week there's some story of money that is being spent unauthorized. I mean, in terms of, for example, this week there was another story of money that was being spent on buying food for trainees, and all of those things, obviously, in a country where, a lot of frustration around corruption cases, this would not obviously bode well. But it shows that, as the minister was saying, looking for more money in terms of doing what government needs to do, the calls are increasingly louder in terms of we need to actually have a situation where government itself is spending money on things that are actually needed. Now they've increased personal taxes, and some are saying, let's reduce the wasteful expenditure in government, and where loops have need to be closed down in terms of how spending is actually done, let's do that. So everybody needs to be tightening the belt. So in another story of, more money being spent for things that they were not meant to be, this obviously will get the spotlight.
With the consultants as well, the story that broke out last week, Mahlatsi.
30 billion, was it 30 billion rand that is being spent on consultants. And obviously, when we're all supposed to be tightening our belts, you would expect government to be the first people to actually do that. And the issue with consultants is that, a lot of reasons are, like a lot of consultants will say some of the people that issue out the contracts don't actually know the work that they're expecting out of consultants. And the way it's priced, that is also a problem. And it's because of the Auditor General. We've heard him on a number of occasions saying that the problem is that some of the people that are hired to be, for example, municipal managers don't actually have the skills. You don't have engineers that are running those projects to be able to cost properly, and that's why at the end some of the projects are 4 times, 5 times more than what would have actually been spent. So the crisis, I think, or the problem that needs to first be resolved within government is ensuring that people that are hired in those positions actually do have the skills and the competency to be able to do the work.
Mahlatsi, it's very interesting here because it says here that the minister is in possession of that forensic report that actually stipulates that he did rip off the government agency, but she's still keeping him as his advisor.
Look, I mean, I think, with the media exposing this, the spotlight will then fall on the minister in terms of how do you still continue to keep somebody if there is this forensic report that has actually put blame on him.
All right, well, we'll leave it there on the Sunday Independence leading story there. The minister covers up wild shopping sprees. Well, let's move on now and look at what the City Press has on the front page. It is leading, of course, with spies run for cover. Now, apparently 4 senior intelligence agents have allegedly been removed from their posts in Africa due to the spy cables saga. And, of course, because their cover was now apparently blown. Now, in terms of state security, Mahlatsi, what do you make of this story?
Look, I think from the experts, they've been saying in terms of national security, nothing has been put in danger in terms of that. But I mean, by the nature of their business, it is a secret organization. And for the first time, we kind of got a glimpse of the workings of the State Security Agency. And obviously, they are embarrassed and they are worried. And that investigation obviously would be about trying to find out who leaked the documents and why were they actually leaked, these documents. And, how do you then move forward in terms of trying to tighten up to ensure that some things like this don't happen in the future. I mean, if you look at the documents themselves, they've been mainly about South Africa's relationship with other spy agencies and not necessarily about things that are happening inside of the country. I know that a lot of people have been saying, they would have liked to know if any documents were leaked, especially around South Africa and towards Polokwane. But these documents seem to date too much from 2009 until 2012. So obviously that investigation getting underway. It will be interesting to see how it unfolds and if we ever find out who actually leaked the documents. Because on the face of it, it appears some of those documents are actually real, especially if you look at the dates and some of the events and some of the things that happened. There is, corresponding timelines.
So we do have Mr. Snowden amongst us here. But journalistically, Mahlatsi, how will this now affect the story going forward? Because we know that those are secret documents, and to really release them into the public, we're just going to stay speculating as to what really happened, because we're never going to get to the bottom of it.
Look, on the one hand, you've got people that are saying the biggest fear is that, it might actually push for the secrecy bill to come into force. And we know that the media has expressed their reservation and actually alarm over the secrecy bill because of some of the clauses in that secrecy bill. So the hope is that it does not actually encourage that secrecy bill to actually go through. But I mean, I think if you look at the media, especially the investigative newspapers, a lot of them are about documents that have been leaked one way or the other, and usually leaked by people within those departments, some of them unhappy with perhaps what is happening, corruption stories that are emerging within departments. And I think that is part and parcel of, a healthy democracy, to get to know what is actually happening. But I think the biggest hope is that it doesn't actually push towards the secrecy bill that has been sitting on President Jacob Zuma's desk for a year to actually go through.
But experts in intelligence are saying that we really have nothing to worry about. Should the public then just sit and relax when such allegations are being revealed? I mean, there's plots of attempted coups and plots to kill people.
Look, I think on the one hand, obviously, it's things that have already happened. That's the one part, 2009 to 2012. And maybe what we might see coming out much later from the State Department is that, we've looked over the years, we've worked at improving our communication and ensuring that it remains within the industry. But I think one of the most alarming things, or if proved correct, is that, spying on South African nationals on behalf of other governments, South Korea asking for a report on Kim Naidu, the head of Greenpeace, and he's obviously taking it up and has said that he's written to the minister to understand if indeed he was actually spied on and for what reason. And that will then put a spotlight in terms of, should they be working on South African citizens, and where, do they follow process and procedure in terms of respecting the privacy of individuals. And one hopes that, spying on South Africans is not something that is as common or as something that is done quite regularly.
Mahlatsi, when you speak of the secrecy bill, one thing comes to mind is the signal jamming, and now all these allegations of spying, especially on intelligence, on state security. What do you make about all those put together?
I think it has been a bad 2 weeks for the department, especially a department that has really been under the radar, not usually in the media platform. Obviously, the jamming signal, we've had so many varying explanations for it, and it sounds from where we're coming from, or what we've heard so far, is that it's going to be blamed on, a lower level administrative person, blamed for, the technical glitch, and it shouldn't have happened. But it has been a bad week for the department, especially because, it's not a department that, wants to put out this stuff. But we've also heard from the minister, saying that, in terms of their credibility, they continue to work. One of the examples he was using this week was that, they've been able to thwart the right-wing plots in the country. We've also heard, around, remember, towards 2012 in Mangaung, we had that situation where there was a plot against some of the ANC leaders, and some of those people have actually been convicted, and that case has actually gone through. So on one level, he's trying to say that, we are on the ball and we are doing our work. But obviously, in the past 2 weeks, starting with the jamming in Parliament and these documents, they would need to really go back to the drawing board.
All right. Well, do stay tuned for more Media Monitor after this short break.
Coming to you live from our Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg, South Africa. Welcome to AM News on SABC News. We're on DSTV channel 404. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We'll be taking you through all the developing stories, all the leading stories in South Africa, in the continent of Africa and the rest of the world. The power utility has attributed the current wave of load shedding to what it has described as unforeseen technical problems at current power stations. Eskom has warned that there is a risk of a total blackout if consumers do not use electricity sparingly.
We must work together to make this world better for all. This is what Nelson Mandela told us. He taught us a very important lesson.
That's AM News, daily at 10 a.m. on SABC News.
Cameroon's economic capital, a unique art collection is on display. Titled Yesterday's Memory, Tomorrow's Memory.
We are trying to preserve this heritage despite many things that have changed in the designing, embroidery and the model.
If I'm telling you, you don't like it, I call it defeat.
Join Musam Khalifi on Afro Showbiz every Saturday at 19:30 CAT.
Welcome back. If you've just joined us, we are live at our Auckland Park studios, and our guest this morning is Ms. Mahlatsi Gallens, Deputy Political Editor for SABC Radio News. Now, there are also other interesting stories that didn't necessarily make the front pages that we are now going to dissect. Mahlatsi, let's start there with, of course, the Sunday Independent Day. It's page 2, and the headline reads, Bold NUMSA is ready for battle. Basically, these are NUMSA's plans for life after COSATU. They've outlined their plans to grow their membership and also assist the United Front, which is a party that they've sort of formed as when they broke away from COSATU. And you know also that the United Front was quite pivotal in the recent State of the Nation address, where they held an alternative on Wednesday of the State of the Nation address. So they're really making their presence felt at this particular time. Your views?
Look, I think on the one hand, NUMSA knows that in terms of within COSATU, they don't have the numbers. The COSATU CEC will be meeting next week, but they know that within COSATU itself, they don't have the numbers. And the reality is that they will need to prepare themselves outside of COSATU. Obviously, COSATU as a brand is quite a powerful one. It could have given them access to other unions in terms of lobbying for what they're ultimately pushing for, which was, for COSATU to take a step back in terms of its support for the ANC, and hopefully if the United Front eventually registers as a political party, that kind of support they would have hoped to be able to get it from within COSATU. But as things stand, they don't have the numbers within COSATU. We don't know how far the ANC process of trying to actually broker a truce between the members of COSATU, how far that is. But we also know that LIMUSA, which is the new metal workers union that was started by Cedric Gina, who is the former president of NUMSA, who broke away because he did not believe with the political stance that they were taking as a party, has applied officially to COSATU to actually be registered as a metal workers union. And that's one of the issues that COSATU will be discussing. And from where it stands, it looks like, they might actually get that nod to actually join the brand that is COSATU. But then the other question that it raises with NUMSA, expulsion kind of sealed, because it doesn't look like we'll have that special national congress. It doesn't matter how loud the calls are. It looks like if we are actually going to have a congress, it will happen much later on in the year, probably a few months down the line. So at the moment, NUMSA has to think of itself outside, what it would do outside of COSATU. And, the question has been, would they actually go to the other federations, the two other NACTU and FEDUSA that are out there? Would they actually join them? At the moment, it doesn't look like that is happening. But we know that they are meeting today. There is a meeting of NOBs from COSATU and the other 8 affiliates that are actually supporting them, where they will be coming up with a plan ahead of that COSATU CEC. So we can expect it to be quite heated. Will the affiliates actually consistent or stay with the decision not to participate in COSATU whilst NUMSA is actually suspended? We'll see. We've already seen divisions within unions like FAU. On the one level, FAU saying that, some of the leaders saying that we will continue with suspending our membership of COSATU, and others saying that, we held a meeting and we decided to support COSATU's decision. So those divisions are actually going through towards affiliates themselves, so not so united. And we'll see what happens at this meeting, if they've got any new game plan in terms of how to approach the CEC. But as things stand, NUMSA does not have those numbers.
No, Mahlatsi, what surprises me here is the fact that NUMSA, on the other side, is still fighting the expulsion from COSATU. But then what does it mean that they already making plans to break away from COSATU if they still have any intention of fighting for their rightful place back? What will COSATU say when they say, okay, well, you didn't show us that you want to be accepted back into the federation? How do you want us to respond?
NUMSA is going ahead with its resolution to say that they will recruit beyond their sector. And from what we understand, they are going quite big, approaching ESCOM, workers at Telkom, Transnet, for example. And now with the problems that Satau is facing, they seem to be also moving in that transport industry as well. So they are definitely going ahead with actually ensuring that they grow themselves beyond the metal workers sector. But obviously, also, on the other hand, they are not letting go of fighting to belong within COSATU. And COSATU has said that one of the reasons they were expelled is deciding to go beyond their mandate. So I guess what they're trying to do is say that let's show our strength to COSATU. Let's show them that we actually do have strength to carry out what we said we will do. And on the other hand, we'll still say that we want to still be within COSATU because we believe it is a vehicle for worker solidarity, and a united COSATU will be much stronger. But as things stand, like I said, they actually do not have the numbers within that CC. And whether the ANC's process of trying to broker or to mediate between the different affiliates, whether that will work, it doesn't seem quite clear, because this week, for example, we already had the National Union of Mine Workers releasing a statement against the march by the Gauteng affiliates to COSATU, and basically saying that they are sticking with the earlier decisions to expel NUMSA. So that fight is really far from over, and it's going to intensify in the coming days.
Mahlatsi, that's exactly what I wanted to say. That isn't that why they were expelled, for expanding their membership beyond their mandate? And of course, what does this now mean for the people, or rather the members that are supposed to choose whether they stay with NUMSA or they go elsewhere?
Look, it's a new year. We might be having shop stewards elections at some of the plants where NUMSA is actually in control. And that's where we'll see the support. And the biggest fear they will usually have is that with a new union that has been registered, and if NUMSA is actually accepted by COSATU to be within that fold, then, and if they do have the financial injection that they need to actually run to actually recruit at those plants, then you might start seeing, shop stewards that did not make it, that were not re-elected, then perhaps deciding to then join the new formed union, LUMUSA. So the big test in terms of where the members are, the people on the shop floor, where they are, we'll see when those shop stewards elections start happening on the floor. Because LUMUSA itself, has said this week that they're continuing to push hard to try and get and recruit members. They are putting out numbers out there that we can't obviously independently verify. But this is a union of 350,000 members. And, shaking that dominance, that's going to be a very difficult part for LUMUSA.
Speaking of shaking, directly under that story, Mahlatsi, is of course a Sunday Times, still page 7. It reads there, Sheikh's plea for ordinary parole, not a legal possibility. Now, according to experts, they say that there is no legal provision for a conversion of medical parole to ordinary parole. What do you make of the story, especially after the recent issue of W. Lewis?
Look, I think obviously at the back of W. Lewis being refused parole, and then Sheikh coming up immediately to say that he also wants his parole to be converted. Quite an interesting development there. And the fact that, it has never been done and there is no legal provisions for it, because he was given parole because he was seen to be sick, and but obviously over the past few years, people have spotted him at the golf course looking rather healthy. And, and obviously all of that being linked back to the president as his former financial advisor. The interesting thing is that he's not going for a presidential pardon, which has been something that was speculated about earlier, but rather choosing another legal route to have it converted. So it will be something that we will need to watch and to see how the Justice Department actually responds to it. I think listening to Mthunzi Manga this week, he was saying that, they will look at it, but it is the medical parole that will actually take that final decision. Obviously, they need the medical parole is supposed to be an independent body, and how they will actually do it without the legal provisions that's what we'll see in the coming weeks.
Mahlatsi, they're very divided opinions over Sheikh's parole in the first place. And isn't this going to bring more scrutiny to the Justice Department? Department in how they deal with this. As you indicated earlier, they're saying that all the people that are linked to the president are actually getting way off way lightly than they should be.
Look, I think obviously that link we cannot ignore, but that's why I'm saying that they would need to be seen to be acting fairly and independent. And that's why I'm also saying that it's been interesting that he didn't go for a presidential pardon, but rather for another route. And that medical parole, even when they took the decision to grant him medical parole, it raised eyebrows, and people were not convinced that he deserved one. But it also puts a spotlight on other people that are within our prisons that have applied for medical parole and have not received it, or it has not received the attention as quickly as they would have liked. So all of those things will come under the spotlight.
Very quickly, Mugabe's party has just ended in Zimbabwe. Your views? They spent about R1 million on that party, Mahlatsi.
I just remember the one sentence he says: to live long, don't eat until you're too full. So that is the one advice we will take. But obviously, within the economic context of Zimbabwe and the continuous, every year, there is a huge bash to celebrate his birthday. You know, those comparisons will continue to dominate how lavish it was, while people are forced to leave the country and go to neighboring countries to actually look for jobs and actually try and put food on the table. A lot of people relying on the informal market to actually put food on the table. So those comparisons obviously will continue to dominate.
Thank you for that. Well, we'll have more on that after this short break. Do go on to Twitter or Facebook and comment about what we're talking about here and all these stories that we've been going through this morning. We'll be back shortly after this.
The 4-month-long strike at the post office is officially over for now.
Workers have indicated to us that we must proceed with a dispute, and we must lead them in the next industrial strike if it comes to that particular point. They felt betrayed by the intervention of our government through the minister, because that intervention simply backstab workers.
A sophisticated network of illegal cigarette smugglers spread out across southern Africa. And many of the dodgy smokes land up here in South Africa. Is it this simple that you know that you're probably smoking an illegal cigarette if it's ridiculously cheap?
It starts with consumers. So if you buy cheap cigarettes, you're not buying a bargain.
That's business news. Weekdays at 6 p.m. on SABC News.
Faith Mutombi was accused of hiding behind a sub judice rule in Parliament.
I do hope that the Minister, when she responds to our questions, doesn't try and avoid accountability.
I maintain the matter is sub judice. I can't be deliberating much on it.
The Minister couldn't respond to some of the questions due to an ongoing legal challenge.
Chairperson, like I'm indicating, this matter is very difficult for me now here to deliberate.
Are we accepting this sub judice defense that the minister is giving? In my view, it's either we do that or we concede that we are useless as parliament.
That's PM News every day, 3 to 5:30 p.m.
Welcome back to Media Monitor. Well, as promised, we now cross live to the Waterkloof Air Force Base, where Griselda Lewis, SABC reporter, is standing by. And of course, today, the mortal remains of struggle stalwarts, Mr. J.B. Marks, as well as Moses Kotane, arrived this morning from Russia. Griselda, a very good morning to you. Please tell us what's going on at the Waterkloof Air Force Base.
Well, a very good morning to you, Alicia. Decades later, finally, the remains of the struggle stalwarts Moses Kotane as well as J.B. Marks finally touched down on African soil here at the Waterkloof Air Force Base shortly after 6 o'clock this morning. Certainly this will bring lots of closure for these families who've been waiting for the remains of their loved ones to be repatriated. Of course, you would remember in 2014, President Jacob Zuma paid a courtesy call to his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin, where it was agreed that the remains of these struggle stalwarts would be repatriated back to South Africa. And on the 23rd of February, we saw the Arts and Culture Minister, Natim Tetwa, facilitate the repatriation of the remains. Now, you remember, of course, Moses Kotane as well as J.B. Marks played a critical part in the struggle of this country and towards the democracy that we now all enjoy as South Africans. And, Moses Kotane died in 1978. At the time, he was at the helm of the South African Communist Party between the 1960s and 1970s. He was Treasurer General of the African National Congress. And J.B. Marks, at the time of his passing in 1972, he was the chairman of the South African Communist Party and also a member of the National Executive Committee of the African National Congress. So certainly today, a lot of relief from these families. We're expecting President Jacob Zuma to arrive here at the Waterkloof Air Force Base at 11:30 and the proceedings to get underway at 12 o'clock. But what would it be without speaking to the families of these struggle heroes, for them to give us details of exactly what it has been for them, so many decades not seeing their loved ones, waiting for their loved ones to return back home. But to chat a bit to me about that at the moment, I'm chatting to the great-great-great-grandson of J.B. Marks, who is Roswin Marks. Roswin, thank you very much for your time this morning. Roswin, certainly a day that the family must have been waiting for a very long time.
Certainly, Griselda. Thank you very much for having me this morning. It's definitely been a day of mixed emotions. Today has brought on a lot of memories. It's brought on a lot of motivation for us as the next generation. I would like to thank the family for firstly appointing me as spokesperson. Being in the midst of these legends, these icons as they have been made out, is overwhelming overall. How do we fill such footsteps that's already been laid? We could only try, and unfortunately they couldn't live to see today. We with them play a pivotal role to ensure that their legacy does, live longer.
As a family, certainly it's important for that legacy to continue. Your great-granddad is back on African soil again. There begins, the education of so many South Africans to know exactly what price was paid by J.B. Marks, and of course for you as a family over these decades, isn't it?
That's correct. Taking into account the age that I currently am, I've actually done the read-up and over the years been educated on J.B. Marks. It definitely has been a struggle, if I should put it that way. And I don't think we actually realize how much these guys has given up for our country. They've really played a pivotal role with regards to democracy. We definitely, as a family, have found a lot of closure. Having the remains here, knowing that it's going to be laying in South African soil, born and bred, and that is where his remains goes to lay again. It's definitely brought closure as well as comfort to a lot of us.
Closure and comfort for a family, but are you hoping that this historic moment in the South African calendar would also bring closure and a lot of healing for South Africans looking at the past, looking at this daunting past that South Africans have been through under, of course, the hardship of apartheid?
Definitely, we would take today towards commemoration. We would definitely remember today. It's going to play a very long memory for us that's living it here whilst we are here. We would definitely look into making today a memorial for many out there. We would definitely make sure that his legacy does continue, remembering that he returned home today.
Right, Rosal, I'm afraid that's all we have time for. Thank you very much for your time there. The great-great-great-grandson of the struggle icon J.B. Marks telling us that certainly today is a day of closure for the family. And they're hoping it will be, of course, healing the wounds for many South Africans in this country. We're going to speak, of course, to the ANC's Gwede Mantashe in a few minutes, but I will hand back to you in studio for now, Alicia.
Thank you for that. That's SABC reporter on the scene, Ms. Griselda Lewis, giving us, of course, what the family views in terms of the repatriation of the struggle stalwarts there. She was talking to the great-great-great-grandson of Mr. J.B. Marks. Now, Mahlatsi, very interesting story here. It made page 8 of the Sunday Independent here. It says 2 struggle heroes come home. Now, under Soviet rule, burial in the Novodevichy Cemetery in Moscow was second in prestige only to the Kremlin Wall necropolis. So it is a significant thing that the 2 great South Africans were actually laid to rest there. Even in a foreign country, there's still struggle stalwarts.
I think what it points to is the strong relationships between the ANC and Russia, and dating back all those decades of years ago. Remember that even when Umkhonto we Sizwe was formed, it was that a lot of the people were trained in Russia. It provided a home for many of them, also intelligence, also funding. I read an article in terms of how, the young people that had left South Africa to go for military training, arriving in Russia, they had to be provided with a lot of things from as basic as clothes to actually wear. Remember, a lot of them were leaving under very quickly, nothing really planned in terms of they couldn't tell their families, they couldn't say goodbye, and arriving in Russia, a lot of them found home there. And those relations between the ANC and Russia continuing even in democratic South Africa. At the moment, we know that we are talking about, we are within the BRICS nation that Russia is also a part of, speaking to that long-standing relationship between those 2 countries. At the moment, there's talks of a nuclear program, and Russia is one of the front runners in terms of providing that. So a very long-standing relationship between the ANC and Russia.
But why is it kept under carpets, Mahlatsi? How come we don't know about these great diplomatic ties that were obviously very strong from way back?
I think we do know a little bit about them, and especially, with the BRICS membership, that was actually put to the fore, that these are the nations that South Africa is continuing under the ANC government, will continue, the relations that the 2 countries will continue to cement. But maybe 2 heroes that maybe a lot of younger people just don't know about, and bringing back their bodies also brings them into the media spotlight, and we get to start talking about them, and we start talking about the history, our history as a nation, and what different people and what different roles people played. Also, another thing that it does highlight is the tripartite alliance, because the 2 leaders were both within the union movement, the SACP and the ANC, and that tripartite alliance obviously dating back years and years and years back, and the 3 of them, epitomizing that relationship between the ANC, COSATU and the SACP. And obviously now, with the problems that COSATU is having, another focus on the trade union movement. But I think their return to South Africa signifying those 2 things, the relationships between South Africa and Russia, and the history of the tripartite alliance. And it gives us an opportunity to dip into that history and talk about those issues.
All right. Well, as promised, we do now cross live back to the Waterkloof Air Force Base, where Griselda Lewis, SABC reporter, is now joined by ANC General Secretary, Mr. Gwede Mantashe. Griselda, back to you.
Well, thank you very much to you again, Alicia. Certainly a very historic day on South Africa's history calendar. The return, finally, the remains of the 2 struggle stalwarts, J.B. Marks as well as Moses Kotane. And of course, as more of the dignitaries come here to the Waterkloof Air Force Base, we're expecting, of course, President Jacob Zuma to arrive at about 11:30 and the official proceedings to get underway at 12 o'clock. The families are also here as well, speaking to the various media. A day of closure closure, they say, for them. But of course, now joining me is the ANC's Gwede Mantashe, who will tell us a bit more about what's expected here today and what this actually means for the African National Congress. Dr. Mantashe, thank you very much for your time this morning. I think let's start with, the final repatriation of the mortal remains of these two struggle stalwarts. Certainly a relief for the African National Congress and for this country as well.
It's quite important for the ANC and the country and for the broader alliance, because both J.B. Marks and Moses Kotane were an embodiment of the alliance. They served in all the three bodies that formed the alliance, and that is quite important for us, because they will be this moment will be used to re-educate younger generation to understand that this question of watertight compartments of the alliance partners never worked in the history. Moses Kotane was the general secretary of the party, treasurer general of the ANC. He's a great trade unionist. So is J.B. Marks. You remember J.B. Marks led the miners in the 1946 strike. He was the national chairman of the party, NEC member of the ANC for a long time. So this thing of wanting to be pure is not real, and that's why, without claiming any credit for it, the theoretical orientation of the movement, including the ANC, they would have just raised their hand if it was today and claim credit for the political and ideological orientation of the African National Congress and the alliance.
Well, certainly they can be classified, as international struggle heroes, given that they played such a pivotal role in sensitizing the rest of the world against, the apartheid government that brutalized so many in this country.
Both of them are internationalists. The fact that they were buried in Russia and stayed there for many years, and to bring them back here, South African government had to go and negotiate with the Russian government, agree on the terms of the repatriation, reflects the gravity of that relationship and the role they played, the respect they commanded, both in Russia and at home. These are internationalists, they are not national. But you must remember what Kotane said, because Kotane always reminded us that he's an African, then a communist, because that national identification is quite important. That's why he wrote the Craddock letter of Africanization of the South African Communist Party. And I think those lessons will be revived now that they've been brought back. And I think they will help us rethink and reorientate ourselves and the younger generation.
Now it's all about legacy and educating South Africans, those who may not perhaps know the pivotal role that these two struggle heroes played in achieving this democracy that we all now enjoy as South Africans. The legacy, the education for those in terms of the African National Congress and moving forward. Of course, there'll be the funerals that will be held.
If you ask any leader of this, he will tell you that if you talk to Chief Albert Luture or Oliver Tambo, both of them, if you come with an idea, they would ask a simple question: does Kotane know about this? Is J.B. Marks aware of this? Because they commanded so much respect and impacted on the thinking of the leadership of the ANC, so much so that the integration of the ideas was so huge. And what was nice about them, even at times when there was hostility towards communists, people would say communists must be fired and be kicked out of the ANC. But once put to who is this communist who must be kicked out? Is J.B. Marks, is Moses Kotane, is Martin Mapeda? Everyone said, no, you are wrong, the idea is wrong. Because they were not communists in the ANC. They were communists and fully fledged members of the ANC, hard workers in the ANC structures. And therefore, that is a balance that we will fail today. That if you are a communist, you are in the ANC, you want to boast of being a communist, and to become a communist member of the ANC. That was not done, it was taboo. You must work hard. Communists in the ANC had one thing in common: hard work, loyalty to the decisions, and subjecting themselves to the authority of the structure they were serving in. And those lessons will have to be relearned by many of us, because these stalwarts influence every great leader of the ANC in a big way.
Dr. Mantashe, just before we go, I'm afraid we're running out of time just a little bit. But the question I want to ask is, what then happens? There are many others who died on foreign soil. in South Africa, those who are not perhaps as prominent as your JB Marks and your Moses Kotane, what do the families of those loved ones then do?
One debate we have opened in the ANC Assembly is that we cannot allow these heroes of our struggle, whether they are known or not known, to remain there. They must be repatriated, but the nation must be patient. That will be systematic and it will be done in an organized way. But people sometimes, when they see JB Marks and Moses Kotane come, then you see the flood of everybody saying, my son, my daughter, my cousin, and so forth. That is not going to work that way. If you are flooding it, it's not going to work. But if we are systematic, you remember, before this we had a journalist, Nakasa, returned. That shows, it's a clear indicator of what is going to happen. All those heroes must come back home, but the program must be systematic and be organized.
And there must be patience. Thank you very
And
much.
People must be patient.
Thank you very much for your time. The ANC's Gwede Mantashe calling for patience and saying that many of those families that believe that their loved ones, struggle heroes, those who've contributed towards South Africa's democracy today, the intention is to get every single one of those heroes, known and unknown, repatriated back to South Africa. But we'll hand back to you in studio for now. We'll certainly have much more for you a bit later on. Alicia, back to you.
Very interesting points indeed raised by SABC reporter there, Griselda Lewis. And Mahlatsi, we're just talking about this, about what does this then mean for all the other struggle heroes that, well, might not have been heroes, but the people that took part in the struggle and are scattered all over the African continent. What are we going to see being done in terms of their repatriation?
Look, we've heard from a lot of people who want the remains of their loved ones to actually return. We know, obviously, the people that died in various countries, in Tanzania, in Angola, in Zimbabwe. And I think the Arts and Culture Department will then have to come forward in terms of what is the plan with their remains, because everybody deserves some closure. I know that there were debates around whether, if, for example, in Tanzania, whether those families should be flown to those countries to actually find closure in that way, and whether the bodies should actually be returned. Are the graves being taken care of at the current moment? And all of those questions. And I think it has to be a holistic plan from the Department of Arts and Culture. Yes, there are known heroes, the ones that were prominent within the struggle, but there were those other ordinary people that lived. Remember that, there were families who for a very long time didn't know where their kids were because of the circumstances that they had to leave the country for fighting for our freedom. And there will be a need for that closure for those families. So I think a more holistic plan is that we're hoping we'll get it from the Department of Arts and Culture. Obviously quite costly and quite complicated the more people are involved.
Thank you for that. We'll leave it there on that one, Mahlatsi. And of course, we wouldn't be Media Monitor if we did not discuss the first official batch of Lesotho's election results are expected this morning. Vote counting started shortly after the country's voting stations closed yesterday. Mahlatsi, the road leading to Lesotho's elections was marred by a lot of violence. There was allegations, counter-allegations, all sorts of things took place. What do you make of what they staged yesterday in terms of the polls?
Look, I think for them to have a peaceful election that ran generally smoothly, that is kudos to the Lesotho Electoral Commission, and also, of course, to the SADC facilitator, Cyril Ramaphosa. This is the moment that they had been working towards. This was an election that was brought forward by 2 years. It was organized just within months to get it to actually happen. So I think on that level, they have done well. But the real test, I think, starts after the vote counting, because we need to know who has won and by how much, because one of the reasons Lesotho was facing these problems was from a coalition government. And now it will be interesting to see if any of the parties win enough votes to form a party by themselves. And if they don't, what are the chances of a coalition government, and how would it work, and who will be part of that coalition government, given what has happened in the past few months and the problems that they've encountered. And I think, but the fact that it was quite a peaceful election, the military stayed in the barracks. We know that there were extra security from SADC that were deployed, and I think that's the first important step. At least it gives it credibility that it went through. Everybody was given a chance to vote, but it is the counting that we'll be watching.
Absolutely. Now everybody's waiting for the votes to be counted, because there were allegations that some parties might actually oppose the winner that comes out, and that is what actually might spark new violence. But let's have a look look at some of the tweets that our viewers have sent us today in regards to what we've been talking about throughout the show today. All right, there it is. James Tabane says, yes, I feel so sorry for AKA and Moneo. I thought they're going to take some awards home. That's hashtag, of course, the Metro FM Awards 2014 that took place in Durban last night. Nebuchadnezzar says, nothing fulfills me like music. Sounds beyond awards included. Her nomination is recognition of her music. That is Ayanda Jia. And of course, Spindile says he was wearing it for attention. Unfortunately, we didn't even care. RT at Mbata MX. There's a guy that had money all over him at the MMA's hashtag 2014. And of course, IG says, repeat, guys. We don't know when the repeat is going to be, but do stay tuned to SABC channels. They'll definitely tell you when those the repeat of the Metros will take place. And Drum Magazine says, from Casper owning the night to Eddie Zondi being honored. Read all about what went down at the hashtag MMA's 14. Well, these are not the stories that we've been discussing, but it is the stories that are currently trending on Twitter. Well, Matlati, before we go, what do you think will be prominent in the news this coming week?
I think in the next week, the COSATU CEC, definitely, that is the Central Executive Committee, is meeting in the coming days, and they have a lot on their plate to discuss. As we said, Limusa, which has applied to be a member of COSATU, whether that will get accepted or not, we'll find out. But also in terms of the way forward and how they manage COSATU, and whether the 8 other affiliates that said that they will suspend their participation, whether they'll come through to the CEC and be part of it. And obviously also we're doing the countdown towards March 11. I can imagine there might be a lot of talk towards that.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Mahlatsi. That is, of course, our political deputy editor for Political on Radio News. That is Miss Mahlatsi Gallens joining us here today. Well, viewers, always remember that, of course, your contributions and suggestions are highly valued. To engage with us, you can follow us on Twitter at SA Media Monitor, and of course, share your views and comments on Facebook. Go to www.facebook.com/Media Monitor and tick like on our page. You can also email us your views about the show. The email address is mediamonitor@sabc.co.za. Thank you once again for watching Media Monitor. Do join us again next week, and in case you missed a live show, remember you can still catch the repeat show tomorrow at 2 a.m. or alternatively go to our SABC YouTube link on www.youtube.com/SABC News. From myself, Alicia Jali, Miss Mahlatsi Gallens, and the rest of the QTIV team, have yourself a blessed Sunday. But remember, more details coming through from the Vato Kloof Air Force Base. Do keep it locked right here on SABC News. Goodbye.